Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
Welcome back to Boss Leap. I'm Dr. Sylvia Morris, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Angela C.B. Walker. Today, we are in for a treat. We spoke with psychotherapist Laura Morse. She is a Nebraskan. She is a graduate of Spelman College and just left us with so many pearls. Laura talked about the difference between an emotion and a feeling. She talked about intuition. And she is a K-Dot fan, people. So please stay tuned for Laura Morse, psychotherapist.
So Sylvia, before we get into our interview with Dr. Morse, we talked to her about what she would do if she wasn't a psychotherapist. What do you think you would be if you were not a physician?
Quiet as it's kept, I looked at going to cooking school around the same time I was applying to medical school.
No idea.
Yes.
You're a good cook too.
I'm pretty good. I enjoy cooking for people.
Yes.
And I looked at the Culinary Institute of America.
I had no idea.
And I remember going to kind of the intake. They had this whole reception thing, and my mom went with me. And it's a crazy thought because I wouldn't want to be hot in a confined space and not be able to look beautiful. So that part of it may not have worked out so good, but I like the technical part and the creativity and being able to make a meal for people and that constant kind of joy. All of that.
Oh my God. What just flashed through my head is this restaurant in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
Sylvia's.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in with your nice outfit on, and the presentation is just amazing, and the food's even better. I had no idea. I learned something new about you every time we do this.
Crazy. I know.
I can see it. Yeah. No wonder I like eating your food.
And I like your food too.
Oh, whatever.
But tell me, what would you be if you weren't a doctor?
If you can probably guess, but if I wasn't a doctor, I'd like to be an artist.
Yes.
Yeah, I love to create. My best friend doesn't have much faith in me. My best friend from childhood, anyway.
Yes,
I'll say her name out loud. Miss Bridget used to laugh at me when I said I want to paint. But yeah, I love to paint, draw, pottery. I mean, you get me anything that is, creative, and I'm all in. So I have my little space downstairs that I have yet to kind of thoroughly utilize, but I'm supposed to make Tuesday evenings my painting evening. And
oh, nice.
yeah. So
Okay.
I just love to create. So not sure if I would make any money at it, but in my other life, that's what I would be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, please stay tuned and listen for our conversation with Laura Morse, and you will hear what she would have done if she wasn't a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Boss Leap. My name is Dr. Sylvia Morris, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Angela Walker. And we today have an awesome guest. We have Laura Morse, who is a psychotherapist and just overall wonderful human being. So Laura, welcome to Boss Leap.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I am just so glad to have met you and looking forward to talking to Angela since I get to meet you for the first time today. And
Yes.
again, very honored to come and to share and hopefully provide something that's helpful to whoever is listening.
Yeah. So we want to get a lot of clarity because we know that you are able to give that. So yes, we did. We're meeting today officially, but I actually got to hear you at Dr. Mandeville's opening of the M Factor, and you were part of the panel at the end discussing all things menopause and shared shined a light on how it can affect our mental health, and so appreciative. And you were just so easy to listen to and had a lot of profound facts. So we enjoy listening to people that we respect and know that we'll learn a lot from you. So thank you again for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you all came.
We did. It was great.
It was fantastic.
So we have a lot to ask you to learn from you. And we're just going to jump right in. And some of our foundational ask are just for you to tell us a little bit about how your journey began, whether it starts from, childhood or as a young adult, how you got to where you are now and what shaped and formed you.
Thank you. Now, I was reflecting on that question because I grew up in Nebraska and
Cornhusker.
Definitely a Cornhusker. And I have, every therapist has a story, right?
Yes.
We have our own origin stories. And so in my family, my mother and grandmother were my primary, parents. My grandmother was not able to finish college because there was divorce in her family. So my mother is divorced, my grandmother's divorced, my great grandmother is divorced and was divorced. Wow. And I said, somebody has unjumped a broom in my family lineage. And so I just think about like being raised by women. And it wasn't until my mother was able to have 2 children, but everybody else was a daughter. And there was only one going through generations. And so in that time frame, in the 80s, growing up in Nebraska and not being, there's not a lot of Black women to know and to see. It was just a very interesting dynamic. And I think that as I reflect, I realized I had a lot of emotion, but I had a family who didn't really value the emotion and know how to speak to it. Yes. You didn't speak to it. And I had a father who was incredibly distant. So if you brought up anything, and my parents were divorced, if you brought up anything like, hey, you said you were coming to pick us up and we've been waiting on grandma's stoop for about, 10 hours. If you said anything to that, then that meant he would just not speak anymore. So there would be no more visits for a good period of time. So when I think about how I came to appreciate psychology, I think it was taking an AP psychology class in high school and learning about emotions, like learning about it, knowing that I have them and people have them, but really understanding like there's a whole field of study around how the brain works, how it's connected to feelings. And there's so much more to psychology, of course, but that's what I resonated with.
Sure.
And I guess a question comes from me is when and I'm sure we'll get into this, emotions and feelings, are they the same thing?
They are very much connected, but how they are expressed, like everyone has an emotions, right? We all have feelings and emotions, but how do we express them, right? So we all have feelings. What we don't always.
So I feel happy.
Yes.
But the emotion associated with that is?
It depends, right? It could be emotion, could be joy. It could be very much,
okay.
Is Dr. Morse happy? Like what's going on? You're like, oh, I'm very happy. And we would not be able to see it, right? So I think when I think of emotions, I'm thinking about like maybe this outward expression, something other people could resonate with or to feel. But feelings, I think about something that is a little bit more internalized, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I realize I put the cart before the horse. Let's kind of go back a little bit. And I use the word sort of psychotherapy and psychology sort of interchangeably. Could you please help my nomenclature and help explain what psychotherapy is?
So I feel like psychotherapy is a term, it's getting kind of like an overarching term, because when people think about psychotherapists, they might think about somebody who provides psychoanalysis, therapy, or more of a process type of working with people. But really, we're looking at degrees, like what type of degrees and study do people undertake, and then how use that. So I think this is important for listeners because people who are educated love to have letters behind their names. And we take for granted that people are going to understand and respect all the letters behind our name, but they don't know what that means. And so usually they're like doctor. So when you think about doctor in psychology, you might think about psychiatry. Psychiatry is medicine, and people who are trained in psychiatry are trained to assess medically and decide, do I need to help this person have some kind of medical intervention, such as medication for an ailment or illness, right? And psychiatrists can diagnose and give somebody an idea of what's going on with them, or I don't want to say what's wrong, but I think a lot of times in Western medicine, it is what is wrong with you. And this is the distinction I think is important because people are afraid of that. They don't want to go to a doctor and be told what is wrong with their mind and then have to get medication.
In comparison to when they show up to Dr. Angela and I, they want to know what's wrong. Doctor, I want to know this happened. Why did it happen? And I'm like, I don't know. You didn't die.
The medication for it too, right?
Right.
So they might be like, please, I have this. I my knee is hurting. What medications for the pain, right? But for psychiatry, it's a little bit different, and the interaction is different. And so the medical doctor, the psychiatrist really is like, what do I need to do to medically manage you? But my clients might say, they didn't talk with me. I have all this history to share with them. They weren't interested in that. And like, that wasn't their role, right? But then we're moving on to a psychologist who could be trained in psychotherapy or counseling. But for many psychologists, they're interested in testing and metrics, or they're interested in research. So they have a little bit more lanes that they could go down to decide, what do I want to do with this education here, right? And so I've met some wonderful psychologists that are therapists that really enjoy practice. And I've met many psychologists who are like, we enjoy the testing part of it. We want the research-based part of it. We don't want to deal with all of the emotional processing, right? And then you have the master's level therapist, which is myself. I'm a licensed professional counselor who craved learning about how to sit with people, how to help them identify their emotions, their feelings, their mental health and wellness, and look at ways to expand and to improve a quality of life, right? That is different than being treated medically. So I hope that helps a little bit.
That's very good. And thank you for breaking it down. So, because I think for probably Sylvia and I both, generally when I have a patient that I know, probably just needs to speak with someone and able to determine which route to go, I usually say therapist.
Yes.
And so it sounds like you definitely, as a psychotherapist, it's in your title, you are a therapist. Some psychologists might be therapists as well. And some psychiatrists may do therapy as well, but they also have another lane that they may be, more drawn to or isolated to. So, very good. Thank you for delineating all of that for us.
I want to say that too, if you don't mind, just because it's important for, like, a client might say, I feel like I have ADHD. And I was like, right. So I know my limitation. I know that I cannot diagnose. I can understand symptoms and probably at this point in my career say, that wouldn't surprise me if you do. But if you really want to know, then you can go to the psychologist and have the testing done. And then once you have that information, what do you want to do about it? Do you need to see the psychiatrist to get the medication? Yeah. Do you need to come back to therapy and learn how to adjust to this new diagnosis? What does this mean for you behaviorally? What does it mean for you socially? What does it mean for your esteem? Right? We can then work through that part of it. So,
okay, very good.
So your approach is to meet people where they are. And I use that a lot when talking about behavioral changes. So when we want people to try and change their dietary habits, as an example, if you're always going to fast food places, then overnight you are not going to start eating salads. So when you talk about meeting people where they are from the perspective of a psychotherapist, can you help explain what that means and how do you do that?
Thank you. I really think about it in terms of when people are coming to see me for the first time, they may have had years of therapy. They may have never have seen a therapist. I can give them an assessment or a questionnaire and ask them, tell me about yourself. And I could probably look at that questionnaire and say, oh, trauma, oh, addiction, okay, family history here. And it would be so presumptuous of me to say, oh, we're going to dive right in and talk about your mother. We're going to talk about mama right now. Like, you don't do that, right?
May not come back.
Pacing is really important to me. So I want to know from that particular client, like, what brought you here? Where are you today? Tell me what's important to you. Get a sense of them and say, all right, you're telling me that you're feeling down and you're telling me that you've had, 15 breakups in a row. I might be thinking, all right, is there a common denominator here? But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, let's talk about what it feels like to come into the office and wonder, is it me? Am I the reason why I cannot have sustainable relationships? And then does that have to do with my family history? When I thought we were all so close and I had this wonderful upbringing, but I'm realizing now that we didn't have boundaries and we had a lot of criticism, things like that. And so meeting people where they are is to be, in my opinion, respectful of how you exist. And then say, no matter how you come, it has value and I have time to listen and to learn about you. And I'm not going to assume that I'm an expert on your life. I'm not. I'll never be, right? But I will be here to use my expertise to help you learn and grow and see what goals you have and hopefully guide you and support you and stretch you and push you and, encourage you along the way. So that's how I think about that, meeting you where you are.
I love that. You kind of just wrapped it up in a bow at the end. And I love that approach. And I think that makes for a very good relationship between, a patient and a therapist. So in terms of how people see therapy, most of us when we were growing up, you saw somebody laying down on the couch and maybe doing like hypnosis, all these wild thoughts that go through people's minds.
Bob Newhart. I'm sorry. I love Bob Newhart.
You were definitely aging yourself there. What, in terms of therapy in general, what do you think people misunderstand the most about what it is?
Oh, there's so much to misunderstand around therapy because of how it is portrayed in the media, right? Like, a lot of times it's funny and you see like this healer, this quote unquote expert, but she is just a hot mess, themselves. They have all of this going on and they're supposed to be fixing somebody. I used to love Fraser Crane. Like I just, and some of the arrogance of it, but then you see all this stuff going on. But I think that a lot of people get an idea about therapy or therapeutic services from the media. I do feel like in communities, especially of color, there's so much stigma that since COVID, people are talking about mental health and therapy in such a different way. I mean, actually how I got invited to do panels and podcasting because people are like, we want to talk about this. But I think sometimes people see it as a moral weakness, right? Where you wouldn't talk about, if you have diabetic concerns or you had cancer or you had any kind of ailment, you're not really impugning someone because they chose to go to the doctor. You're actually like, oh, that was smart. You have benefits. That's so great. You're using your medical health care. Look at you. And then going to therapy feels different for a lot of people. I've had people come into my office with some, I don't even have like this office in a special place, but almost like just shrouded with like, covering up. And
they were hiding.
Going on. They're like, I've been sitting in the car and I've just been so ashamed to come into this private space, a more private space than a lot of people have if they're going, to a clinic for, I don't know, sexual health. Right? So I do think it's changing, but I do think a lot of times people think that this is not really that important. And mental health is different than physical health, where we all know it's very much interrelated.
Absolutely.
And you brought up COVID, and I thought, certainly it's now been in the popular lexicon as far as seeking services. When someone is looking for a therapist, how do you recommend they go about finding the right therapist for them?
Okay, so thank you. That's a great question. Sometimes it's kind of reflecting what feels important to me at this time. For many people, it is a crisis. The crisis is the important part. Like my child is, so anxious or so depressed, or there's some type of self-harm involved. Self-harm could be mental, it could be using mental health or physical related. Sometimes it's drug addiction or use. There's a lot of ways we can self-harm actively and passively. Or this feeling, this I'm coming undone, and I've never experienced this before. This anxiety is crippling to me, and so now I don't know what to do. So in that, then you have to, as a therapist, kind of assess, what do you need immediately? Are you in a position where there is a type of self-harm or thoughts that require immediate intervention, right? So there's different levels to it. And if you're not at that place, but you're like, my quality of life is just not where it could be, and I really want some support around it, then it is, who do I want to speak with? Do I want to speak with a woman? Do I want to speak with a Black woman? Do I want to speak with somebody who has education or understanding about depression only, or do I not know? And so what I tell my clients or people who call me, or even after the first session, if you don't feel comfortable sitting in the space with someone,
yes,
you're not going to open up and tell them the rest of the story, right? I can't tell you how many people have come in. It's like, I'm coming here because I'm having relationship problems. Okay, 2 sessions in, I'm actually wanting to talk about this abuse that I suffered as a child. Right. And so I have to be prepared for any type of conversation, but I know that I wouldn't get there if people didn't feel comfortable doing it. So I ask my clients, people are coming in, if you don't feel comfortable with me, allow me to help you find someone that you might want to work with. I'm not for everybody, and not every therapist is for everybody, and it's okay. But I think sometimes when people are in crisis, they're so exhausted and they're like, it took me so long just to find you, so I'm going to ride it out.
Or get an appointment.
Or get an appointment, right? But there are some times we work with a practitioner like, this is just not going to be a good fit. And then we have to kind of hopefully have more energy to say, let me find a better fit.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up and explaining that aspect, because that's usually my first comment to patients when I recommend, therapy. Number one, my recommendation is that we should have an annual visit with a therapist, as you would your annual, well woman exam or your annual physical exam, just to check in. That would be lovely, I think. But that's not currently in our lexicon, not happening. So, but I do tell patients when we're talking about therapy is that, it's just like a doctor. You realize who you have, a medical doctor who you have a good relationship. And if you don't get a good feel, you don't have to stick with that person. You can, see someone else. And as a matter of fact, I'm not offended by that. If you need to, if you need a second opinion or would like to see someone else, like you said, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. But don't, I hate this analogy, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, when you are, saying, oh, well, therapy is not for me because you didn't have that connection with the first therapist that you spoke with. So, and it's nice to hear practitioners that are open to helping someone, find someone that might be a match for them.
Yeah, I got to take the ego out of it.
Yes.
Like how we care for ourselves, especially if I know somebody has really, it took them so much to even consider mental health therapy. And they're like, why would I switch? I think you're great already. I'm like, I just want you to know that I would help you, that it would be important, that I'm never going to be more important than the work that could be done.
Is there any advice that you find yourself giving your clients that you need to remind yourself of?
So I have to be careful, like in therapy, we're not supposed to necessarily give advice. So we throw out like concepts and be like, have you considered, or are you curious about, right? It is about the framing. But I think that one thing, especially with the influx of women that have been so privileged to be able to have seen, Black women, as we look more about our holistic wellness, is permission to care for ourselves, right? This idea of that we're not going to get all of the awards for burning ourselves out for everybody else. Right? And I say that to them because I had to say it to myself, right? There's this idea growing up that that productivity was constant busyness, right? And so you had to show not only yourself, but other people that you were continuously
We're grinding,
all the
all
right.
those phrases.
Yeah, hustle culture, and it's like we have these terms and they get really popular and people are trying to live up to what that even looks like, right? But I think that helping someone to understand, like, well, actually help see how productive actually are you, and if you're burning out,
Yes.
like truly burning out, then what's really getting done except for damage, right? Damage to self. And then we're looking at, again, esteem, right? What is our self-esteem, our identities? There's lots that you can go down and explore with people, right? But I think that that's the one thing because people are tired and they're coming because when people say I'm tired, it's not just that they need to take a nap, right? It's like, what am I hearing in this?
Yeah.
Tired.
So and therapy itself this can happen in medicine as well. When you have a patient that may be dealing with, I would say kind of a modifiable illness, something that they may be able to change behavior and affect the outcome. How do you balance empathy and accountability in therapy when you find that there's someone that's just stuck in a difficult place and they just don't seem to be able to move from that?
That happens, and then that's what sometimes in therapy people will start to plateau, and I feel like it's that growth, change, that point where we know that to grow means to stretch and to be uncomfortable again, right? So they might say, "I'm here in therapy, and my goal was to start therapy, maybe start medication, not feel as bad as I have," and they're like, "Oh, I'm feeling better. All right, now you also talked about all of these things that were important to you." And I ask at the beginning, what would make therapy worthwhile? This is a financial investment, right? This is a time investment. What would make you feel I am rewarded for the work I was willing to put in? So I'll always keep that in the back of my mind. The empathetic part is when people are stuck and you're kind of gently pushing them, then they want to push back, right? And they're like, I'm feeling good. Why are we talking about this now? Or I don't know, things are just never going to change, and that kind of hopelessness. And I'm like, well, so much has changed. So maybe we're reflecting on it. So I want to be empathetic and respectful, but I also want to say, you wanted to get your money's worth out of this here, right? So what is it that what we can do or explore that would help you go a little bit further, just a little bit further? What needs to be done? And they could sit back and say, well, I've got to start being more accountable now because I've been focusing on what the external part of the change instead of the more internal part of the change, right? So for example, if a person comes in, or I'm just using women because I have a lot of women clients who are like, I finally got rid of this guy and he's just been, I've been dragging him along, or he's been dragging me along for all this time. And I finally set boundaries around him, and now I'm feeling lost and lonely, right? I know that it was healthy to get out of this unhealthy relationship, but what am I left with? Right. And that could be this regret, right? This could be pulled to go back into a dynamic or a place or space that they have been used to for years. Right. And so then there's resentment that builds up. And sometimes in therapy, say, you're the reason I'm not. You're the reason why I'm not with Charles anymore. I'm like, no, Charles. I might be like Charles needed to go. I knew Charles needed to go, but of course I would never say that, right? It's like, you've come so far, you're healthier, you're setting boundaries, and that's when we know how boundaries are working, because usually other people are unsatisfied with that. They don't like this, like, because they were going to require to do some adjusting and change too in order to stay in a relationship with you. Right. And so I have to remind my clients, like, you've come so far. This is a lot of work that you've done. I know you don't want to go all the way back. So what else can you add? What else do you need? What can we explore around that? Just to get the pacing part of it, but to help people feel more empowered to go through the uncomfortable growth part or piece, and then hopefully not feel alone in doing it. So,
got it.
So, Laura, we're going to lighten the mood a little bit. If you were not a psychotherapist, what would you be?
Oh my gosh. If I had the talent, I would be on somebody's stage performing. I love music and I love performance, and I just appreciate people who get out there. I don't know what song or genre it is. If they are able to sing out or do something where people are swaying back and forth and cheering, like, I think that's a gift. But since I don't have that talent, I probably would have ended up in education. My mother, the teacher, my grandmother ended up being a secretary. She had to drop out of college because her the circumstances, but she told me that she would have liked to have been a social worker. So there's all this interesting care and probably has some other roots to it too, but codependency finds its way in all of it. But it's still very beautiful. My mother's 78, and she is still substitute teaching in all the high schools in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm so proud of her because she just cracks me up. I'm like, Mom, you don't have to do this. You don't. She said, these kids. I'm like, you don't have to do it. But she loves it.
That's my mother. She retired at 77 and from teaching. And she's 84 now. Yes. Every year she would say, I'm so tired. And I was just waiting and wait. And then it was, one September after school had started. And she said, I don't feel like going today. and she retired. So but it was the kids. It was the love of teaching and, I think her purpose, right? So
I'm guessing that how that trickled down to you as a doctor and how you relate to your patients and
definitely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but I definitely think so. Yeah.
Awesome.
But Laura, how did you get from Lincoln, Nebraska to Spelman?
God, no. Because I do love my home state. I'm a big Nebraska sports fan, and we got to get our football team together. But it'll come. I actually got here. My mother, being a teacher, was part of the National Black Caucus education for the NEA, and they had their own caucus. She was an officer, so because of that,
that's a big deal.
It was a huge deal. A huge deal. Oh my gosh, it was our vacation too. So when we would have their conventions, that's how I got to get out of Nebraska. So we'd be in DC, and then I'd go to Minnesota. I remember my first time going to Los Angeles, all because there was an officer with this convention, but she would introduce me to her colleagues and peers that lived in these big cities. And one woman pulled me aside and she asked me where I was going to college. And I said, well, I'm not sure. And she said, have you considered an HBCU? And I said, what is an HBCU? And she said, oh, come here, honey. And we started to talk, and she explained to me about the HBCUs and why they were founded, what was important about them.
Wow.
She was like, I'd like you to do some research and consider. And I was like, well, I like DC. Maybe I'll go to Howard. My mother was like, okay, well, just apply. I did really well in school. So I applied to Howard and Clark Atlanta and Spelman and then Nebraska. And I wasn't so sure about the South because I had this whole perception of the South. My mom was like, things have changed. And Atlanta is really, this wonderful city with a lot of up and coming Black people. And I was like, okay, but, we'll see. And I got in. And I went to Howard, and I had never seen an urban environment like Howard.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, well, what is going on?
And that was like 90s DC.
It was late
80s DC.
Late 80s, right?
Which was a whole different thing than current DC.
My friends and line sisters from DC were like, Laura, you didn't know anything? I said, I had no idea. So I didn't go. I was like, oh, I don't know about this.
It would be shocking. Yeah.
My mom then would not let me visit any other school. She did not bring me to Atlanta because she already knew where Atlanta, at the time, West End and the same late 80s. She's like, if you go down there, you're not going to go because you're going to be scary. So she can't afford to visit. So pick a school, pick Spelman. Just like, okay, I'll just go to Spelman. More houses across the street, I guess. It's so. It was so haphazard. I get down here, and I remember the cab driver. I said, well, what is this? And he said, this is Section 8. This is the project. I said, that over there. He said, that's your school. And then I started to cry. And my mom was like, get out of the car. And I think I cried every week the first semester. And my mother was like, if you keep crying, I'm making you come back home. And like,
yes.
I was so out of place. Like there was nobody else from Nebraska. It was just me.
Yes.
I'm 6 feet tall and very thin. I had Jerry curl. Like it was a whole scene. Yes. And I also knew that this was the place that I was supposed to be. I get emotional about it because my grandmother, like I said, she she wanted to go to school, and her parents being divorced, her grandfather or her father said, I promise I'm leaving the family, but I promise that you'll go to college. And that didn't happen. So she had to pull out, and she's so smart. And because being the secretary at the University of Nebraska in the education department and when I tell you, all these people getting their PhDs would come back. There's the reason why I have my doctorate today. So she held on to this land that
What's your grandma's name?
Oh, yes. Charlotte Jackson. Charlotte. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also the reason why I'm emotional is because I love Spelman. I feel like it was divine intervention. My grandmother held on to this land. She was very frugal, and she sold it right at the time. It was time for me to go to college. Between her and my mom, because we were poor, I had Pell Grants. And I at graduate.
We remember Pell Grant.
Yeah. And thinking like, oh, I got this scholarship. And the counselor was like, we're not going to make this announcement. I'm like, but I got all these Pell Grants. And she was like, babe, you have no idea. It's okay. That's how I got here to Spelman, was that my mother was like, this is where you're going to go. My grandmother was like, this is the money. My mom was like, work, study, grind, figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's blessed me in so many ways. So I don't know where I would be. Not to say anything about my home state. I love it. But you know how you kind of get into a mode and expectation and what people think that you can do, especially as a young Black girl. So going to Spelman in the South opened me up to like a world of possibility. Never met so many beautiful, accomplished people in my whole life. And I wouldn't have if I had stayed in Nebraska. I know that.
So I see you getting emotional, and I appreciate that and the vulnerability. And as someone who holds space for others that for their emotional space, how do you take care of your own mental and emotional health?
Because that is really important. And as you can tell, I am a very emotional person, but I do have to compartmentalize. And I feel that I have really worked hard to master how to do that, meaning that hearing somebody else's pain, you can empathize with them without owning it, right? So I have learned early on in this career, and probably I worked in psychiatric hospitals and rural community mental health and substance abuse recovery, and have worked with some clients who have had some incredibly difficult life circumstances, but are like, I want to get better. And so being able to hear their stories and just hold that space for them without interjecting my own emotion or thoughts or experience into it is a skill, but so necessary. And people are always so grateful that you can do that. Because I think that sometimes people have experiences where there's a lot of shame and guilt, right? And so they choose to say, my story isn't worthy of sharing because other people can't handle it. I've always felt like if I could just learn how to create a safe space for someone to have feelings, kind of getting back to that emotion, and I know that I will be a really good therapist. And so I've been able to just care and not inject or to get so involved in other people's lives where it becomes, oh, now this is about me somehow.
Yes.
And if you could go back to that young woman who was a little bit teary-eyed in her dorm at Spelman, what advice or what would you say to her?
Well, oh man, I think I would just say, it was okay not to know everything, because I surely didn't, but you had an intuition and a gut feeling or a drive around you that just led you. And so to trust it more. And I think that, as life gets, we get older and we learn more, sometimes it's easy to stay in the headspace and not go back into our heart and our gut space. And so I have learned over time that it's really important to tap into that intuition and to trust it. And I know everybody would have a different way of like, oh, this is just intuition, or this is my spiritual connection, or God, whatever it is. Like, it really, really has value, and it says so much if we will slow down and pay attention and honor that. So
can you tell us a habit that you have picked up in your 40s or 50s that maybe you wish you had started earlier?
So I'm 55, and I would say this is the last 3 years is exercise regularly.
Yeah.
I grew up, I'm 6 feet tall. I was almost too thin growing up, and that doesn't mean that you're healthy, right? So then getting older, having children, body changes, menopause. I'm like, oh, I want to look a certain way, but I don't want to do the work around it. But honestly, what it was, again, with COVID and the pandemic was walking. I would just go outside and want to move.
Yeah.
And then it became, okay, well, I can talk to my girlfriends while we're doing this, and everybody's stressed out, but we're moving. And oh, look at the trees and look at this, right? And so that exercise, of course, now, and I knew about this, but it's different when you when you're like, oh, it's as important now, even though the research has been out there for a million years, like, oh, this makes sense now, that's how we release our own traumas, right? Is through movement and activity. So it helps with our nervous systems, our vagus nerve, all of that is important. But the focus on exercise, to me, the commitment that I've had to it, even before came here, I did some exercise, was very intentional, and it is specifically for me and no one else.
Yeah.
Honestly, exercising the last couple of years with this program and you have people that are doing it too with you, was probably the first time that I said, I will really commit to doing something that is completely 100% for me.
Mm.
And it's strange to say, yeah. But so, and I'm like, oh, it took me a while to get used to that concept, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we'll just stay here. And we always talk about self-care regime. So you've mentioned walking and certainly being able to compartmentalize and hold space for other people. What are other components of your self-care regime?
One lately has been rest. The value of resting. There's a woman, Octavia Rahim. Where's my book? I always have
that. Rest is Resistance.
Yes, Rest is Resistance. She's done Gather. She's just amazing. Like just to listen to and to talk. But I thought about again the pandemic and how everything just slowed down, and the anxiousness that I felt about, well, what can I do? God, I want to do more. I want to work and see people, or I just want to be doing, but we're not supposed to do anything. We're supposed to stop and stay away from people. And so just because somebody says to stop doesn't mean that we're always resting, because resting is mental, right? And then there's emotional resting. And so really looking into what does rest mean? And why is this so hard to do? So I think connecting that back to this idea of, oh, if I'm not busy and I'm not productive, I don't have value.
Yeah.
Right. And then learning like, of course I have value and I will always have value. And if I rest, I can do more of the things that are important to me. Right. So that's a real big part of the self-care regime now, is also the resting, not just physically resting, but mentally resting.
Yeah.
I sat down before, but my mind was like, ooh, turn. Right. So now it's like, Laura, how to slow down your thoughts and how to kind of meditate and be more mindful, which is something that I love, and the concept and the ideas behind it. And I want that for my clients. I'm like, I've got to practice this too.
So that in and of itself is great advice, is just the rest. And I'm not sure where that comes from in terms of the busyness, why we equate being busy with success, or
idle hands of the devil, or all those phrases that
we learned growing up.
Yeah. And then especially as Black people.
Yeah.
And what'd you say, Laura?
I was going to say sometimes the stereotypes that were forced upon us, like, oh, lazy, what's anything but, anything but. Then it's like, well, I got to prove myself that I'm not, know, and you already know, because you are very accomplished doctors, like it took a lot to get to where you are, like not just to go through the schooling, but to be good at oh my goodness, you all have the stories. I'm sure you've shared them, right? And so if that's the norm, then we do what is familiar all the time. And at some point it's like, well, I can't sustain it in this particular way, because now 55 years old and tired and a kid, all I have kids, life situations. And so does that mean that I'm now less than, or something else is wrong? It's like, no, I've done what I've done this, and this is okay. And so now I had a supervisor once, she was trying to help me figure out how to maneuver my practice differently. And she was looking at things. She's like, Laura, I want you to learn how to work smarter and not harder.
Yes.
I said, I have not thought about it.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I had to really sit back and think, well, what does working smarter look like?
Mhm.
And figuring out and have more energy around it, more longevity, right?
Very
I
good.
think this one provider, I went to a workshop and he's a psychologist, and he said that the true work span for a psychotherapist or anybody's in mental health was 7 years. I'm like, I've been doing this for 20 something years. Are you kidding me? And everybody laughed because people are like, what? What are you talking about? And he said, exactly, but that's optimal time frame. So then, of course, he went back to talk about how would you have a career that has longevity and quality.
So to me, I just, again, the spirit that you had when we met at the conference and I heard you, and then just listening to you today, it does sound like you have peace and joy in your life. Can you tell us what currently brings you joy? Are there certain activities or things that are currently that you do?
I love music. That's why I wish I could perform, but I love live concerts. I love live concerts. So if I have a favorite artist, I will see that artist multiple times. So Common is one of my favorite artists.
Oh, I love
I'm going to
Common.
wonder if he's like, why is she always at my show? I will go. And I enjoyed Kendrick Lamar immensely. I went to two
Yes.
shows recently. Beyonce's coming
Oh,
up.
wow. Wait. You saw Kendrick and SZA?
I went twice. So I've seen
Oh,
Kendrick.
Now, will you travel to them?
Yes, I went to Charlotte. He's been here many times. It was my sixth show. I've seen him 6 times. When he
wow.
started off at the Tabernacle, and then one
Yes.
back in the day. And the funny thing was, like, I loved it. And we went to Charlotte. Went with a friend of mine who's also she's a psychologist and works for the VA. Veterans Administration. And so we are huge fans. And so we traveled to Charlotte and ended up getting on the floor. We were at 6th row.
Ooh.
Nice.
Oh my God. That's so cool.
I promptly get back to Atlanta to try to get some dry shampoo for my hair. And the lady was like, do you want to use your senior discount today? And I was like, it was so, I just looked at her and she looked at me and I looked at her and she looked at me and she was like, do you? And I was like, how old do you have to be to have a senior discount? And does your screen show that? I hope that it did, but I wanted to tell her, like, I just got back from SZA and twice, and I was on the ground floor, but she didn't care. And I did take my 20%.
There you go.
Get your discount,
it's a
girl.
both and. It is both and. So it's music is fun and just that celebratory, being with other people and singing. So that's something I love. I'll spend dollars going to concerts. It's the time, honestly, where I feel like I'm most in the moment.
Yeah.
I
can relate to that. Yeah, I can relate. My youngest daughter, and both of my daughters love music, but my youngest, it has a very eclectic taste. So whenever I'm with her, I'm introduced to different music, and there's always music, always. And it's interesting. And it just brings me joy. But as I was talking to my mother, who's 84 now, and she loves to listen to music in the car. And she mentioned, when I get in the house, I never even think about the music. And I remember growing up, we didn't have a lot of music playing in the house unless I put a record on. But I think there's value, and there's almost like a therapeutic component to having music playing. So I often will do that in my phone. I'm carrying it around, and I've always got something playing.
Definitely same. All the time, cleaning, in the car, listening over and over again, challenging myself. What I want to hear differently in this, Derek trying to keep up with his rap beats, but he's just been so great around mental health too. Like, as a Black artist, if I ever got a chance to meet him, I would thank him, because I've had men that I've worked with who have really resonated with his work, and his music has allowed, and his poetry and his, oh my gosh, his novel and hip hop, it allowed them to speak to their own depression or anxiety in a way that was easier for them. I don't know how to say that, or more like easier in the sense of it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to talk about
permission.
That.
Because you have this guy from Compton.
Yes.
Who, for all the world, looks like just not average man, but just regular Joe Black man. And he's talking about mental health. But question for you, do you have a favorite song or our rap line from Kendrick from his entire discography? Is there something that you hum all the time that we can say on our PG rated boss?
Listen to me. I know that is so hard because I appreciate every single album. Oh my gosh, I should have written this down because there is like Man in the Garden is off his newest album, GNX. Really is this manifestation of like where he has gone and how he has grown. And I think him leaning into, I worked for this. I own that I have this massive talent, and I own that there is one, I am one of one. Do you know what I mean? So I like that whole song. And then the end has expletives in it. He's like, tell me why you think you just, you know what I mean? Like, I put in this work. Like, I think we all, in our careers, in our lives, in our womanhood, we have put in work. How dare you try to minimize that? Do you know what I mean? So there's something about that, even though I'm not going to walk around saying that to people in their face, like, you know, why you deserve the greatest of all time and, you know, cursing. But just the idea of owning that in a way unapologetically. I mean, there's so many things, but just that. And there's songs that has just made me cry, you know. He has a song called How Much a Dollar Costs, where he's looking into this person who's on the street that wants money from him, the way he's judging that person. And then he's realizing that that person is God too, and humanity. And we don't know our situations. We don't know where we're going to be. So could we have compassion and empathy no matter what? And it's a practice. I'm not perfect at it myself, right? But I just appreciate, you know, the depths of which he can explore topics in personal or community wise.
Love that. Well, what a beautiful way to end the conversation. We would love, we would love to have you back. And any parting words that you'd like to say. And I don't know, we would love, you know, if you are accepting new patients or if you have any, you know, social media handles that you'd like to share, please, you know, feel free.
So I'm not really great with social media. I am Laura Morse, and I have it's lauramorse.com. So if you are curious about me as a therapist or practitioner, let me know. But I do want to say this. There are a lot of therapists in Georgia, and I know sometimes people are like, it's hard to find. This is why we talk to others and ask them like, hey, do you know any therapists? Because for the most part, somebody knows somebody who has been to therapy. So you know, those referrals can be really great. Hopefully doctors are starting to provide networks or resources out there. Psychology Today, Silence the Shame, like Google is your friend when it comes to mental health. It is a great tool to learn about it. NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, is great. They have amazing content specific to so many different populations. But if it's something that you're considering doing, you know, you're worth it. Your mental health is part of your health.
Yes.
You cannot separate it. It affects all parts of our being. And so why not take care of it? Because you deserve to. And so if it's just about how do I get started, there are people that can help walk you through it. Don't be afraid or ashamed, or don't let that fear or shame stop you from enjoying or improving, possibly really improving the quality of your life. Because we only have this one life. So we deserve to have it be better if we want it to be.
Love that. Thank you so much. Oh, just we always end with lots of pearls. I'm not sure. I'll have a whole necklace at the end. So happy to have you with us. And thank you for bringing us the light today. We really appreciate you.
Makes me very, very happy. I'm, again, very proud and honored to be here with you.
Wonderful. Okay, Sylvia, that was just a wonderful episode. I think if you think about like who you would pick as a therapist for myself or one of my patients, and I could tell them I've got this fabulous therapist. She's so easy to talk to. Just her voice alone, you know, puts you at ease. You'll be able to open up. It was Laura. It was, you know, Dr. Morse. So I just thought the interview was really great in terms of what she had to share, and all the things that she's about. And I would say in terms of what I got in terms of pearls, a lot of them. One of the things that resonated with me in terms of, I don't quote me, but I think in terms of like living our busy lives and what we're doing, she talked about what's getting done without damage. So without harming yourself in terms of we talked about productivity always being, on, trying to get things done and never really resting. So what are you doing that's productive without damage to yourself? And whether that's what she meant to, that's what I took from it. Number 2, the value of music. Music is, for me, very therapeutic, and, songs take you to different places in time.
And she threw out Kendrick Lamar. I was like, oh, my girl.
Exactly. I thought of you immediately. I knew you guys were bonding, which I like, but I'm new to Kendrick. So in terms of actually Kendrick Lamar, she referenced one of his songs, and in it, the essence
Man in the Garden.
Yes. I worked hard for this. And being able to own, the things that you've accomplished. And, for me, as I, in the moment, thought of reminding yourself of the things that you've worked hard for and have actually accomplished. So that's what I took
yourself
away.
On the back, if I can just kind of step on your line. But yes.
So how about you?
Again, so many things. It was a wonderful conversation. And I know that our listeners are going to have lots of take homes. Just learning the definition of a psychotherapist was really helpful. I've been very messy in interchanging psychology or psychologists and psychotherapists. There's some distinctions. We hope you picked up on that. And emotions and feelings and the nuance that an emotion is an outward expression, whereas a feeling is sort of that internal thing, and they're not always in complete agreement or alignment. And then kind of finally, I like the concept of using therapy or psychotherapy to improve the quality of your life. And we're all on this journey. And I know the part of the reason we do Boss Leap is that we want to improve the quality of everyone's lives. And we're improving the quality of our own personal lives. And by doing this and being on this journey. And that was such a great reminder. So I'm so grateful that Laura spoke with us today. And I know that everyone that's listening to Boss Leap will have enjoyed the conversation with Laura Morse.
Yes, agreed, 100%. And to all of you that are listening, we hope that you would listen, like, subscribe, and that will help us to hopefully open up the doors for other listeners. And certainly, if you can give us whatever feedback you have and anything that you'd like for us to talk about, we'd love to hear about it. And until we meet again, may you be well.
May you be well.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleappodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language. And you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.